Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bycast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights from real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall. And welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Firewall. And today, we have a very special guest, Craig. Craig, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you for having me. My name's Craig Wahl. I run a company called Neorth, which is a CEO advisor and leadership accelerator company. It needs to help the CEOs get out behind from the chaos and the mess. And when leaders need to build and learn skills, they come to me to help them level themselves up.
That's amazing. And I'm assuming that vertical and that business is busier than ever.
100%. There's so many things going on in it right now. There's so many companies that are trying to navigate all the challenges of the world today, and there are many. And having a trusted partner who can come along and kind of guide them through some of it, who's seen some of it before, who sees the complexity in simpler terms and helps them kind of prioritize their business in ways that they weren't thinking.
Yeah, for sure. So, big topic these days, I think, we've all heard about this buzzword is, how is AI affecting that in the sense of leadership, helping leadership in good ways, bad ways, and kind of assisting our world today. How is that rolling into your vertical?
Well, one of the biggest things I'm seeing now is anyone can be an expert with AI, and it can manifest itself a lot when you see that as a leader. You're using AI to lead people and not actually have depth of knowledge, depth of experience, decision making, the accountability framework that you use. And so it's manifesting itself in weird ways because people are using it to do things that humans should probably be doing. My personal belief is leadership is a human to human thing, and you use AI to augment who you are, not replace who you are. And I think a lot of leaders are falling into the trap that a lot of people are with AI, where it's replacing them, not augmenting them. And there's, to me, as someone who does this a lot, there's a big difference between using it to your advantage, leveraging data sets and analysis and all that to help you make decisions and process information faster, versus telling you how to communicate with someone or telling you how to decide something. Those are pretty big leaps that some leaders are starting to make. And it's becoming evident to the teams that they lead because they can just dump it into AI too and fact check it, and they're getting the same answer. And so as a leader, how do you think that makes you look? And so it's a dangerous slope for some people who have maybe overestimated the power of AI as a leader.
Yeah, it's interesting when we look at that. It's kind of like I've seen it in the universities and schools where in the beginning kids were using AI to help them with their homework and actually do their homework. And then you see it now rolling out where companies and business owners are now using AI to generate the reports, generate their thought process. And now the question now is you're so reliant on it or you've become dependent on this tool that how do you think on your toes? Like, are you really going to run back to using your phone or your device to say, okay, now I'm in this predicament. How do I react? And it's not there in your brain in real time making decisions with you. It's more of a guidance platform that is giving you some sort of advice that you're kind of thinking, okay, I'm a matter expert. I'm going out there. I want to think like I'm going to sound like I know what I'm talking about, but then, in a challenging moment when adversity or, some sort of resistance comes back without that experience or proper knowledge, how do you respond correctly? You can't be like, hold on, let me pull out my phone and start talking to my AI agent on what my next steps are. So it's an interesting challenge.
And it highlights something that I think is starting to plague a lot of companies that we as leaders have to start closing the gap on, which is a couple of set of skills that, you know, I think may have been lost a little bit in the school systems, which is critical thinking and problem solving.
Hmm.
These are things human brains are really good at. They're good
Yes.
at thinking critically about things, and they're good at problem solving. And so as a leader, one of the things that I talk to a lot of emerging leaders and growing leaders is the focus for the leader is not on skill development, but it's on, in the traditional sense of like the job skill, it's brain skill and thinking skill and these sorts of things that we've been taking for granted a little bit over the years. And this is one of the dangers that I see as someone who does this is that AI is taking some of that away from people. And so how do we continue to flex that muscle, use those muscles, and continue to force critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, decision making? And that's a set of skills that as a leader you have to have, but then you also have to impart that, coach, mentor, build skills like that in your people if you want the teams to be successful.
Yeah, that's a very good conversation. And actually, yesterday I was listening to another podcast. Forgot the author of it. I was just kind of randomly selecting something, and they were talking about how the negative effect of technology in the schools since the adoption, and they were like till 2010. I think the school system was still on manual, and they're showing now a decline in cognitive thinking and problem solving and attention spans and all these other things where classrooms have adopted more and more technology, and there's a correlation to it. Literally, like they're like, you can see every generation since like the 1900s, the academia was going up, problem solving skills were going up. The past generation was pushing the next generation up and challenging them more and more, because the problems were becoming more and more complex because there wasn't tools to assist. Now that the tools are assisting in such a capacity, now they're like, okay, well, I don't really need to think about solving this problem. I'm actually using technology to solve it for me. So we've got a bigger problem that seems to be brewing. And the question now lies where, when will it surface? Kind of like we're talking about, some people are talking about health today, like, oh, the seed oils and certain things that have been in our food system that everyone's like, well, now we're going to reverse that, and Europe has banned it for decades, and now North America is going to finally ban it. I think we're going to see a tipping point pretty soon where certain schools are going to start reversing technology from the classroom, and possibly, there's going to have to be some new guidelines around that in the workforce.
Well, and sorry, and you're hitting on something that I've reverted back to. And so I say that with all honesty, reverted back. I carry a notebook and a pen because of the cognitive need to write, which helps me remember, process. You don't realize that the physical activity of writing something and the impact it has on your cognitive brain and how it works in terms of that kind of processing. And I'm seeing it more and more and more where a couple of my customers, you can't come into a meeting room with a laptop anymore. Phones aren't allowed to be used.
Yeah,
It's the person who's presenting the data and the information and the metrics and the dashboards and that's the computer. Everybody else has notepads.
that would be very interesting.
And it's interesting, but I have other customers where they have technology in it and it is a distracted room. Somebody gets asked something, in a lot of cases, someone's not paying attention
That's interesting.
because
I would love to see what that looks like in a boardroom where nobody's got any tech except for the presenter. Oh,
and so you like and so when I start to talk to people about the effects of AI on leadership, these are some of the things I'm starting to really start to use and recommend and talk about, which is how do you build problem solving skills? How do you build critical thinking skills? How do you build decision making skills? How do you empower people to be focused? And that last thing I talked about is a focus thing. The idea that people are distracted in their days at an enormous rate. No matter, like, from the moment they wake up until the moment they go to bed, they're distracted by any number of things, predominantly technology.
right.
And
Yeah.
so I ask people to think about what it's like to not have it. Just don't bring it and see what happens. And it's interesting. I have two different customers I can compare, and the one without is way more engaged. There's way more conversation. There's way more discussion. There's lots of debate. Something else I think that's missing today is debate. The idea that you and I may not agree on something and we can still be friends, because that I think is also something that I think is also missing because of the technology. It's easy to hide
Oh,
that you,
100%.
right? And so
100%.
bringing some of those core fundamental human aspects of the workplace specifically back, because I think COVID had a lot to do with this. It made everything okay. And I think we're feeling a little bit of the backlash after. predominantly the entire world decided it could work from home after fighting it, hugely fighting it for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Like I think about banks and insurance companies and companies like that who never let their people work from home. Overnight, it was gone. And now I think we're coming back to, I think we're pivoting, the pendulum's coming back to something that isn't always tech, always AI, always, it's figuring out what the balance is.
There's a lot to unpack there. What you just said, when you look at banks and government and financial institutions and the entire downtown core on major cities across North America, one of the things that were lost with this whole work from home is relationships.
Yep.
At the end of the day, sure, it was like, oh yeah, I got my buddy I've never met before. We Zoom or we, webinar all day long, and that's not the same than physically going to lunch every day. Hey, let's do coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll meet you, at the local coffee shop. We'll grab a coffee, or we'll go down to the office cafe and a water cooler talk that's happening in the hallways and stuff like that. Like these things are gone when you're working remotely, and so loyalty goes out the door. Even collaboration, like I know that when I've put people in the same room, eye to eye, saying, "This is what we have as a challenge, let's figure this out," you can see the wheels turning on people's heads going, okay, how do we address this issue? How do we actually get moving forward? And it's not just, oh, well, let me go research this and I'll get back to you to 1 2 weeks or 3 to 5 business days. And I'm going to AI this and figure out what the best options are. It's the power of many as a human element, which improves the company as a whole, but you also have this unified, like it's very complex because you have the reward mechanism and the dopamine that these individuals in your company have made a change to the company, not a tool or a technology. So there's like this reward mechanism. There is now camaraderie within the resources within the team saying, hey, I can rely on you, you can rely on me. Then they're building something as a company, and there's that level of like ownership, where when we're looking at everything completely autonomous and remote, it's transactional. There is none of those elements of what human nature. And it's funny because I always go back to this. It's all about human nature. Like, why do you have a family? Why do you have a relationship? Why do you own things? Because you have a connection to them. And if there's no connection to it, best analogy is like Netflix and Spotify, where you would, I'm sure you and I, as kids, went to the store and bought a CD or some sort of form of media that we would own, take it home and listen to it or watch it on television and be proud that you went and got that piece of music. And today, it's all a subscription. If you don't pay for it, there's no tangible collection. There is no great, hey, I've got this amazing rock and roll collection. I'm just looking at your two vinyls behind you, sitting there going, like everybody was proud to have the Michael Jackson album, and a David Bowie album. Like it was like, and that U2 album, like
Mhm.
these were pinnacle pieces of art and music to a society. And it was a thing to own that piece of tangible good. And today it's like, well, I just got a subscription for $10 a month and I can listen to it. But if I don't pay my dues, I don't get to listen to it. So it's a connection. And I think we're losing that in so many ways. That technology between Uber with food, disassociation on making a meal, sharing a meal, it's transactional and everything is becoming transactional top to bottom. It's very scary.
And it's interesting. So you hit on something that's I'm clearly passionate about, which is music, and you can tell certain kinds of music for sure. I think I'm an example of what the new world probably will be, which is I have a subscription because it's convenient. If I'm on the train, if I'm mowing the lawn, I just throw my headphones in and I can play whatever I want. But then there are times when one of those albums will come out and I'll just sit down and listen to it because it's just great to hear it in its original format, the way it was intended. The songs playing in the order the artist wanted you to hear them. And I can use that example for most things. I was working with a company whose founder didn't really trust people until he, and using his terms, broke bread with them. So at the moment I broke bread, and it was at a chain restaurant, like it wasn't like something special, but everything changed because that's how he built a connection, was through that process. And so I think one of the other things that you talked about, because I think everything you said is spot on. I've seen this time and time again. People in a room, things change, and they change for the better 99.9% of the time. But there's also something else that I think is lost, which is the ability to have a mutual understanding of each other. Where when you're online, and especially as a leader, you don't have the ability to build that mutual understanding of who the person is, who you're talking to, what their life has been like, what their experience have been, how they process information, what makes them excited. It's hard to build that across a screen like we're doing right now.
Mhm.
It's difficult. You sit across the room from someone and you watch their facial expressions and their body language, how they lean in certain times, and how they stop paying attention at certain times. Those are all inputs that help you build a relationship with that person and help you build connection to that person. And so I think, as it comes back to AI and things of that nature, I advocate highly in just everywhere I can. To me, it's not artificial intelligence. And this is not me stealing or creating some cool term. I've heard this time and time again. It's augmented. It's part of your toolkit. I think back to like the antiquated days of the encyclopedias, Encyclopedia Britannica or whatever it was called.
There's a few of them, but yeah,
Right.
Britannica was the big one.
Right. And it was like a set of reference materials on the shelf that you pulled out when you had to do difficult homework.
Correct.
AI is kind of like that. I don't know how to do this. I need to find out information. One of my favorite things about AI is one of my best friends has a feed in his AI that tells him all the cool things going on in our city. And we watched Mexican wrestling at a Mexican event at the local community hall 3 months ago because he had an AI feed that told him it was coming. Right.
That's cool.
And so you see what I mean? Like it can be so powerful, and it can create so much fun and enjoyment and things like that in people's lives and in your work, and make it easier. But don't misinterpret it for some key things about what you do every day. It's not a replacement for experience. It's not a replacement for your own analysis. It's not a replacement to make decisions, solve problems for you. It's not a replacement for that. It may be an input, but it cannot become the replacement to do that thinking. And that's where I see the biggest gap for people in terms of how they lead people. And you think about how easy it would look to be the smartest person in the room with AI, and your leaders thinking you're the best at your job and all this. And then all of a sudden something goes sideways, and it's somebody that's not been involved as much comes in and has all the skills and abilities and solves the problem. You got to think about that sort of how to assess that and understand what's going on, because AI can mask certain things in your team.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I think that, we're the wave and adoption of AI is being embraced in so many different ways that, we're blindly, I think, accepting, let's call it, its amazingness, but everybody's avoiding and not even looking at some of its faults. And, it's I think we're going to have an aha moment in the near future because, they're talking about employment challenges, they're talking about new job skill sets. The tidal wave is too fast, too rapid for the average society to adopt and to adjust. The shift is massive because, like, I do think that people will find new jobs and will create new industries and new skills and new things. We're talking about experiences. I wouldn't be surprised that the whole world experience of, human experiences are going to flourish post this, because that whole world will now be like, well, I'm tired of working in my day job that's completely, autonomous or robotic or whatever. Not, I need to go out and experience reality and real amazing things in my life to give me joy. So that'll be a form of, an escape to get into that personal experience. But how does a company today kind of look at that balance? Like, you've got speed, and you've got resilience, and you've got all these challenges to kind of plan the next phase. And I think that this is a big challenge. Like, we've been telling business owners, you can't be sitting on your hands or your head in the sand saying AI is not coming. AI is coming. So you're not going to win this war saying, I'm going to stick to pen and paper. Nice, novel conversation. And yes, applications in the boardroom or in huddles.
Yep.
Thumbs up if you want to do that from a, a manual process. But how does a company now start thinking around, okay, let's build this company around speed or resilience, or, how do you see that evolving?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One of the things is that when I think about this in its context is speed without some resilience can create some volatility, right? Like it can create some things that being going fast doesn't always mean good. And so, a couple things. One, AI accelerates output, accelerates processing of data. It is what I would call an accelerator. You can do more faster with AI. Does that inherently mean you will be more successful? I think the obvious answer to that is no, because the human element of this comes into play. What goes into the AI? What's the AI processing? Is it good data? Is it the right data? Are the prompts right? Or are the where you're pointing it, is it the right thing? Because if it's not, it's fast, but does it tell you what you need to know? And these are, I think, parts of where businesses have to be careful, because I hear this all the time. We need to AI our business, right? And I ask this: well, what do you want to do with AI? What's the one of the biggest use cases I've seen is a data analysis model, large multi-page spreadsheet. I saw it and instantly went, why aren't you using AI? Contract review. If you use Notebook LLM, it's the best document reviewing tool ever, and fast, like super fast. 800-page document. Ask it questions, it gives you answers instantly. And you got to
Right.
think about it in your business like that. What's the problem you're solving? What's the output you need? To me, this is where it gets really, and this is the resilience of the business is you start to use it to speed up your business. Great. But what are you speeding up? And I encourage lots of businesses to take a deep breath, stop for a second, and analyze what they want to do. Where do you want to focus it? Because focusing it across your business can be very dangerous, because you can start AIing and automating everything. And then all of a sudden you've got AI agents responding to your customers and it's wrong. And you've got data analysis pointed at the wrong places and it's not giving you the right info. And it goes on and on and on. And so this is where I start is thinking about it in the context of, one, what are you using AI to do? What are you automating? What are you accelerating? And how are you using it? So what's the purpose? Is because this is the other thing about AI. There's so many different kinds of it that not all of it's good at everything. And so you have to sit down and think about what you're using it for, what the desired outcome is, and then it can speed things up. That going back to what we started with when we started talking about, which is the human element of critical thinking and data analysis, that has to happen first.
Right.
It doesn't come by just deploying it. Well, it can work, but if you want it to work and keep the business resilient and growing and focused, it requires that question: what is the outcome? What is the value? What is the right? When I used to run a big, huge help desk, one of the things we automated everything, but I always started with this question: what do we want the people doing? Because if we're automating something, that means we're making the people more efficient, which means they get more time to do something. Well, what is that?
Mhm.
And is it valuable to the company? Is it valuable to the customer? Is it valuable to our metrics? If you can't answer yes to some of those questions, why are you automating it? Right? It applies to your business. If you need good metrics on your lead development, your funnel, your pipeline, your efficiency, your engineering output, whatever it happens to be, throw AI at it, but have a purpose and understand what it's going to do for you, how you're going to use it, make sure it's being used right, and then really take it and accelerate it. And that will definitely increase your speed. And it can reduce a couple of other things, especially in technology and software companies. People don't like to hear this, but it can reduce your need for extra people. Small companies, their biggest cost is people. And if they grow, people grow with it. But if the cash flow gets sideways, first thing to go is people.
Right.
And so maybe this is a way not to hire the extra person, which keeps your cash flow clean. So all the people who do work for you have a more stable company to work at and things of that nature. And so that's part of how when I'm working with that, and I would encourage companies to take that breath. It's not passing you by yet. You should have a strategy for it. You should be thinking about it. You should be implementing it. But if you haven't started yet, it's okay. But start with the what you want it to do part. And I highlight this as one of the companies I'm working for. Founder and CEO said he wants everybody using AI. And then everybody came back to the meeting the next week and they all had different ideas on what they were going to use it for.
Mhm.
And now all of a sudden you're disjointed and there's a lack of consistency and there's a lack of focus. And so that's when I hear that the ability to speed up your organization, or can I use it to be more resilient? To me, resiliency in most organization comes down to really one or two things. Do the people believe in the company and are they committed? And do you have good cash flow? Those are the two biggest things. Everything else should be supporting getting and keeping customers, which will drive happy people and good cash flow.
Right. Yeah, it's a fine balance. When I look at it from our side, like we're typically the guys that sell more tech and more automation and more processing. We try to advise customers to embrace a lot of these tools and stuff like that. It is a very challenging thing. Fully agree with you on the productivity side. I think that 90% of the time when we're trying to present technology to companies, it's about getting the staff that are able to produce double, triple, quadruple the amount of work that they do today with less errors, more efficiency, happier employee engagement because now they're not doing mundane work. And nobody wants to do mundane work, but at the same time, somebody has to push the buttons and get the process going. So being able to automate that and being able to be more efficient is key for that. So, I'm really kind of intrigued about some new stuff that's been going on and like your perspective on it. So, like when we talk about leaders, and you mentioned that you've got this one leader that wants to have like everything in the company, you know, going over onto AI, we've seen time and time again more studies and more reports are coming out that most AI projects are failing because part of the number one thing is that they're trying to achieve way too much. But the rate of change is also happening way too rapidly. Like what I thought was going to be a year out became a reality last week with one of the AI platforms. And, with Claude, the recent release now, it looks like Claude is going to be, leading the pack, and who knows you know, who's going to come out with the next big jump, because I was already reading that, Google Gemini may be better already than ChatGPT with the latest release. So now apparently Claude is even better than both of them. So it's like, how do you manage this? How do you have leadership A, make decisions, be not as reliant on it? Like there's this whole balance of like, okay, we want to go this route, but we also have to be weary, like stuff's changing so quickly. And then at the same time, we have to also not rely on it, that, if we're getting into bed with one platform and all of a sudden, something better comes out tomorrow on another platform, we're not jumping ship here and we're going there. Like, how are you managing all that leadership and all the rapid changes that are coming down?
So it's an interesting problem. And so when I think about this and I'm talking to leaders and I'm working inside of organizations, and this question gets posed, which kind of usually comes out as, which AI should we use? Something like
Pick a
that,
dart.
right? Where I start is AI isn't a tool, it's a set of tools. Let's start there first. If we're buying software, it needs to be AI driven software.
Hmm.
There's lots of software out there that has AI built into it to do purpose specific tasks for software. And if you're buying and using software and you haven't paid for the AI tools in it yet, let's start there, because you've purchased that for your business. It means it's specific to your business. Let's pick on a CRM as an example. If your CRM doesn't have AI running in there and doing a whole bunch of things, for you, like data analysis, probably some agentic AI outreach, these sorts of things, you probably have the wrong tool
Right.
because it's not using AI. And so that's where I start with most leadership teams, is starting to have that conversation. Let's talk about the AI strategy from how do we want to deploy this across the company? Meaning AI is going to be in all products and software we buy, purpose, and I'm talking about purpose built stuff. But then when you get into this sort of what I would call the user driven AI, it's the regular employees, life at home AI, it's the chat GPTs and the Clouds and the Geminis and the Copilots and the all this sort of stuff. This comes back to me more about something that I think you do as well, which is cybersecurity and thinking about where data is and what's going in. And so it's not just about what tool to use. There's this other part of this about like thinking about your business and all of the privacy and data security and data things that you manage. Do you want it in an open AI or a cloud or something like that? Even when they tell you that it's in your own little private world, do you really want it in outside of your organization? And so that's one of the things that when I'm working with companies is we have to have that conversation first before you can have the actual what do you want to use conversation, because some stuff may get eliminated because the risk tolerance of the business isn't going to allow it in terms of the using of certain tools.
Mm.
But if I was talking with a leadership team about this, I would start with the purpose built stuff, making sure it's all AI driven and you're leveraging it. But again, it comes back to tool sets and it comes back to what you're trying to do. There are certain tools, I'll pick on a couple of the big brand name ones. ChatGPT is really good at writing content, and maybe you write a lot of content. So maybe your marketing team and your sales team needs a ChatGPT license. Maybe you work in the finance or the procurement or the ops part of the business and you look at contracts and terms and conditions and all this sort of stuff and like proposals and RFPs and all that. That's data analysis. I've not seen a tool that does it better than Notebook LLM. It is the most powerful tool to use for that in my experience. And so maybe you need like, and so that's also part of that conversation about the strategy, which is understanding as a leadership team, what are you going to be using it for? Simply buying AI doesn't solve any problem. It comes back to what I said earlier about as a leadership team, the strategy has to be purpose built, tools off the shelf. But underneath all that, it's the what are you trying to accomplish? Efficiency, increase work output, do better data analysis, whatever it is. First, figure out what that is, then deploy the strategy depending on the tool set that you need. And here's the other part of this problem. Google or ChatGPT or like whatever, research on AI companies. Pick any industry. Pick any industry right now. And there are 15 or 20 companies that say they're AI specific for that industry. So how do you know that what they're building is useful to you? And so this is going back up to building that strategy, understanding what the outcomes are, what tools you're using, and then deciding which tools you're going to use based on the outputs and the outcomes you're trying to accomplish rather than just trying to use AI.
Right. And it's a different thought process and a different challenge altogether, because I think you were very generous to say there's maybe 10 to 30 different companies out there. I'd add at least one to two zeros to the back of that, because everybody's using the word AI today. And what we're seeing, I'm going to best analogy I can give people on that is kind of like during the evolution of the Apple app era, where, ICQ and Facebook and, even WhatsApp and all these companies that came out, they were disruptors. And then what eventually happened was is companies like Microsoft came in, Facebook came in and they bought up a whole slew of these products and integrated into those ecosystems. I think that we're going to see quite a bit of that happening, in the next year or two. I think that we're waiting to see, I wouldn't say the industry level off a little bit, but I think at some point when it sort of starts to taper off, I think people will be, call it selling to larger corporations and exiting, or you'll start seeing Microsoft and some of these major trillion billion dollar companies buying up some of the smaller products and integrating and aggregating them into one platform. But yeah, it is a tool set, just like an office suite today. And, when you look at any technology stack, talk at cybersecurity, talk at anything, I think we're all in some sort of a solution stack that we work with today. Craig, I kind of want to wrap this up in the sense of like words of wisdom. I always like to do this, next steps for the listener out there as a final remark.
So where I would say is if you think about being a leader, think about all the skills and tools you need and what legacy do you want to leave behind? What's the thing that people will remember about you when you're not there anymore as their leader? That's the thing I ask everybody to think about as in terms of on their journey.
Interesting perspective. And I want to thank you for that one because it's definitely thought provoking and not usually part of the conversation with our podcast. So great one. I like it. I want to thank you for coming out, Craig. It was really great having you on our show today. Everybody who's still listening to our podcast, thank you. Please like and subscribe. We're always looking for amazing and talented individuals to join our podcast. We've got an incredible lineup coming up over the next few weeks. So, looking forward to possibly having you back on our show, Craig. I want to thank you again for being on our show and much success. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll see you at the next one.